No role plays, no conference calls, no BS. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader. This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, on this episode, I want to talk about psychological safety.
I love this topic. Let's go.
Me too. We've discussed it before, and we've talked about people like Amy Edmondson, who are the foremost names in this type of this conversation. But I saw something online recently. It was published by Timothy Clark. He wrote a book about 3 years ago, and the book is called The 4 Stages of Psychological Safety. And I thought this was interesting when I saw it kind of laid out in a table format here, because there's my belief or my opinion over the years when it comes to psychological safety is that it's almost like a light switch. Like your team either has it or you don't have it, and you can test as to whether or not it exists on a team by watching a team interact and seeing if it exists. But the idea that you can just that you do something or you do things differently and then all of a sudden, boom, you have psychological safety on a team, that was inherently problematic to me, because like how do you get there, right? And the 4 stages of psychological safety talk about this from a standpoint of that you kind of have to start somewhere. So like if the team doesn't have psychological safety, you can't just throw them into the deep end of the pool and then watch them swim or try to teach them how to swim while they're in deep water. You have to give them little baby steps. You have to start somewhere and you build up to it, because they're not going to act in a way that is validating from a psychological safety standpoint until they have the psychological safety already. Otherwise, that would be detrimental, right? If you're expecting a team to act in a psychologically safe manner just because you've told them that this is a safe place, you're going to have a bad time, because they're not going to believe you. They have to see it in action. And that's where these kind of stages come into play here. It was the things you have to do in advance to make sure that your team kind of comes with you on this journey. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I think it's a great, interesting kind of dialogue, because I think there are elements of teams that where there is like pieces of the puzzle for like the psychological safety. And I think
Sure.
that it becomes about the leader understanding, like what are the things that we do have currently where we can start to kind of build on top of this, where are the things that may be either pain points or situations or spaces where we seem to have less of like psychological safety. So like, again, we've talked about this before. If you are bringing the team together into meetings and the leader is the first one to talk or provide an opinion, then people tend to fall in line with that. If you don't create space in the meeting where you're asking for opinions that differ from yours, or for different opinions to help build a strategy, like you're not creating the space to allow people to step into, the ability to have an opinion that might be different than the group or different than the leaders. So like, I think that it's not just okay, boom, hey, everybody read the book, everybody got the article, everybody listened to the podcast, awesome. Effective Tuesday, we are now a psychologically safe team and environment.
Yay!
Yeah, exactly. Like, no, like that's not going to happen. It does take time. It takes observation. It takes intentional behavior and ways of creating the framework that allows there to be these spaces for people to then be able to, step into them and then have to be recognized and celebrated for taking those types of steps and those types of chances in front of themselves, their peers, the leader. So I think that it's an ongoing thing. I also think that you can say, well, no, like I have a psychologically safe environment in my team or whatever, but there might be certain topics that create the space not to be as psychologically safe.
Right.
We might talk about this thing and everybody feels great about it, and we're open and we're transparent and we're debating ideas, and we're like, no, like this is what I think, this is what you think. And then there might be a topic where everybody gets quiet, and where now it's not as robust in conversation. Now it's not as comfortable to state an opposing position on something. And so, like, again, I think it's an ongoing, constant look at over time, how do you build this into the team? But it does require intentional actions to get a team there over time.
Yeah, anybody can drive a boat in smooth seas, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, almost anybody.
Almost
right?
anybody, yeah.
Except for those people that like jump off the back to try to like surf behind it, and then they fall off the boat and the boat drives by itself.
That's pretty dumb when that happens. But the point is that you can't designate yourself a captain who knows how to drive a boat just because you can drive it in smooth seas. Just like you can't say you have a psychologically safe team unless you put it to the test. Like, it has to be tested, and you have to come out the other side still believing you have a psychologically safe team. And so these kind of are kind of presented in an almost Maslowian format, and I like that a lot. They're almost you have to start somewhere and move up from there. And the 4 different stages are inclusion safety, learner safety, contributor safety, and challenger safety. And I like this a lot because where it starts is with a person's innate need to be included, accepted, and gain a sense of belonging. So if you're not filling the room with people who you might inherently think are problematic or might challenge you on something, then that's a problem already. You can't say your team is psychologically safe if you only surround yourself with people who think exactly like you do. You have to include everybody. And even if that means that you're including people who you might view as will inherently more likely to inject something that is different or that might challenge something in the group, and that people need to feel that way before they will ever progress into saying something that might not be taken well, or that might hit the ears of people who think, oh, that's a problem. If you don't feel like you belong in a group of people or at the table to begin with, you are not going to speak up. And the lack of speaking up does not mean it's psychologically safe. You can't just say, oh, nobody said anything, and the people who did, we talked to them and everything was good. We have a psychologically safe group. No, every single person would have to anonymously say, yeah, I felt like I could say something if I had a problem. The point of this is that when you start with including somebody, what does that lead to? What happens amongst a group of people when everybody feels included? People feel like they are allowed to be there just for being who they are. That it's not that they are allowed to be there in spite of who they are, but that they are included because of who they are. And that is a very different thing. If you're included in something in spite of who you are, you might think, oh, I'm a box that had to be checked. I'm included because it would look bad if I wasn't included. That doesn't necessarily mean I feel included. So being included and feeling included are very different here.
Yeah, no, and it's a great foundational element of the beginnings of getting to that point where people feel included, people feel accepted for who they are, people feel appreciated for the different perspectives and opinions that they bring to the table, and they understand and they know over time that most of what we're going to do is going to fall in the middle somewhere most of the time. Right. Like there's going to be rarely times when any one of us kind of feels the totality of our opinion being the thing that ends up being the ultimate strategy. And I think building in that dialogue and providing examples of that and doing things to practice with the team that are not specific to the work, but are specific to creating the spaces to have that dialogue and to include everyone and to show the example of this is not about us having, us feeling included in a way that we only have the debate and different opinions. This is that our opinions are heard, that our thoughts are validated, but at the solution most of the time is going to be a combination of the things that we all bring into this. And that's an important thing to talk about, because if you don't clarify that, if you don't show examples of that, if you don't practice that, it can feel like, well, I always have an idea. I'm always expressing how I feel about these things, but my thing or my idea doesn't really makes it over the finish line. It's just a smaller part of a larger thing. But making people feel and understand that's so valuable, because that small tweak, that small adjustment is going to help us get to where we need to go. And sometimes your adjustment is 80%. Sometimes that adjustment is 5 or 10%. But it's absolutely necessary for us to refine what it is that we're working on. And we're going to celebrate that. And we're going to appreciate that.
Right. But if you don't feel included to begin with, from a standpoint of you are in the room because of who you are, there is no way that you won't think my ideas weren't included, therefore I'm not included. Like this is me who's being excluded here. If you feel like you're included, really intentionally included because of who you are, and that you're valued for being there, and then your idea does not make it over the finish line, you don't think of it as that, oh, this is not a psychologically safe place here. My ideas are always shot down. You think, oh, there were better ideas, and maybe next time it'll be mine. This is how it works. If you don't inherently think that, then that isn't psychologically safe environment. You have to be able to separate the two things. Am I being shot down, or is my idea being shot down? And those are very different. It's really difficult not to have those things be intrinsically tied together if every person in that room doesn't already feel like they're supposed to be there and they're invited to be there because exactly who they are. The next step here is the learner safety. And this is where kind of people start to think, all right, I have my basic needs of food and shelter are met. Now it's time to learn something. So once I feel included and I'm invited to be here, my next step is that I want to learn more. I know I'm allowed to be in the room. I know I'm wanted in the room. I'm expected to be in the room. Now I can let that part of my guard down and start to actually learn things. I want to learn from people who are around me. Maybe I don't have the tenure in this room to be able to interject something yet, but I want to learn, and I want to get what I can from people around me in order to kind of help refine my own ideas as I move forward through these conversations that we're having.
The learning piece is such a critical moment in the acceptance in the safe space, and I think, and here's why: because sometimes it can feel lonely if you feel like everybody else around me knows more than I do, or everybody else around me is so much more comfortable with this process, or they have all this data in their mind and they have all this context and experience, like.
Which is always the case at first. That's always how it is at first.
Absolutely. Right. When you get into the new roles, you get into new responsibility, that's kind of what it should be to a degree. But the ability to learn, and then to have that grace given, and then to also to have leaders and those around you understand what type of learner that you are, so that it's not getting frustrated because you just don't get it, or when we come together as a team, all we do is a visual style of learning, and that's not really your thing, or it's such an important piece to this, to understand it, to respect it, to provide the space for it, so that people know, and that we share our own testimonies where we've had to learn. And a lot of times we talk about it like through the sharing of mistakes. Owning mistakes, sharing mistakes, talking about mistakes, sharing bad ideas, talking about bad ideas. Like the whole reason of that is to provide people kind of the permission or the grace to say, it's okay for you to say, you know what, I don't know yet, or I'm not sure, or I'm not there, or I'd like to learn a little bit more about that before I can shape my full opinion. And that's perfectly fine. But I think it is a really important space that I think sometimes gets overlooked, because you tend to hear but you have the job, so you should know that by now, or those types of things shut that down and can be a real negative element of not providing the psychologically safe space.
Right. Timothy Clark defines the social exchange element of this is encouragement in exchange for engagement, and that's really that is as simply put as it possibly can be. If someone is learning, they should want to engage a little bit. They should dip their toe in the water, and that needs to be met with, heck yeah, how's that feel? Does that toe feel good in the water? Let's get your whole foot in there. Not you're not ready yet, or that's the wrong toe to put in the water, or whatever it is. It's acknowledgement of the fact that, hey, if I'm the person in the room who has been here for a long time and I have all the knowledge, if I'm the subject matter expert and I'm leading the group or whatever it is, I need to understand that there's a reason this person is here. They are here and they are included because they're the right person to be in this room right now. Once I know that, it should be very easy for me to encourage the engagement as it is happening, as a person is learning and growing. If I am stifling that in any way, it means either I don't actually believe they should be here. Like I'm trying to make sure they don't become a contributor in this group because I'm worried that they're going to upend whatever I have in place or whatever I think how things should be. If I'm encouraging them to dip their toe in further and to engage more, it means that I don't care what the contribution is yet. I know they're supposed to be here, and I know that if they do this the right way, they will make a meaningful contribution eventually to the group. And I want to encourage that regardless, like wherever the chips fall where they may, right? The next step is the contributor safety. And so this is where a person has a need for autonomy. It's less about we're gonna guide you and coach you and help you learn things. This is, okay, you've learned a lot now. It's time to show that in action. It's time to demonstrate what you have learned by contributing something that is meaningful to the way things are already done, that show that you have a maybe not a mastery of the information, but you understand it well, and you can demonstrate what you've learned. You can show that, hey, over the course of the last 3 months or whatever it is, I've earned in hindsight my place at this table by the fact that I've learned everything and I can execute these things on my own without somebody looking over my shoulder.
Yeah, I think this is again another really important one. It's one of the ones that I feel when you're a leader of leaders, this is the critical one. Is like you have to give people the space and the trust to go out and do what they know how to do. And some of that is a little bit of building some confidence. Some of that is a little bit of making sure that that they have the spaces to share how they're feeling, that they are that you know how they learn, that you're providing them with a level of leadership and development that matches who they are and how they continue to advance themselves, professionally and personally. But I think the contributor one and that autonomy, you have to be really clear with leaders up front that that's exactly what you're doing, right? That like, look, I want to be here as the resource. I'm going to give some guidance. I want to be the one that can help you work through the things you want to work through, but I want you to do it. I want you to trust your instincts. I want you to make the calls, make the decisions. We can talk about them. We can make the adjustments. But this is such an important part because if the leaders are too reliant on their leader to make a decision, to make a call, to not feel that level of independence, then they just become something that's needy and that they never feel the ability to really go out there and do the role as expected with a level of confidence and capability, knowing that they don't need you, but they appreciate when they have you and the guidance you can provide to them and the perspective and the connections that you have, and they're more deep and meaningful because they're not about the directive elements of, did you do these things that I told you to do, how I want you to do them. And so I think it's super important.
Yeah, I think this is where this transition from learner safety to contributor safety is where a lot of people fail in creating a psychologically safe environment. This is because it's the first time where ego comes into play. If I am the leader of a group, or if I am the subject matter expert, if I'm the person whose tenure is not questioned because of the length of time that I've been there and the positive contributions I've made in the past, a new person is not inherently a threat to that. Them learning is not inherently a threat to that. The moment they have autonomy to put into place the things that they've learned is the moment where some of the things they do will be the way that I've always done them, and that will be validating of the way that I do them. Other things they do will be different. They'll do them differently to accomplish the same result. We all agree where we need to go, but we all have maybe different ways of doing it. And the moment they start doing things autonomously, they will do things differently than I do them. And if that becomes a challenge to my ego as the person who has been there a long time, that's when a lot of leaders can kind of jump in and start to say, well, don't do it this way, do it my way, right? And that is the lack of autonomy, and that is the lack of psychological safety. If they feel like they can only do it if they're doing it your way, that's not psychologically safe. That means that you said, yeah, we want you to be here, and you dipped your toe in. Yeah, come on, jump in. Like, we want you to be here. Wait a minute. You're not swimming the way that I swim. No. This isn't going to work now. Mm-hmm. That's where the problem happens. So this is where where you can kind of first see whether or not a leader or a group of people is putting their money where their mouth is do they allow people to do things differently and autonomously without always breathing down their neck? And then the final element of this is this challenger safety, which is that if a person feels included and they feel like they're invited to learn and they feel like they can execute autonomously and do things a little bit differently, then the natural inclination for all people is to try to make things better. And if they have different perspectives than a group of people who have always been there, and they want to contribute something that flies in the face of the way things. So, hey, look, I've been doing this differently, and look at these results that I've gotten over the past 6 months. They're better than the results this team has gotten in the past, and I've done it this way. You're challenging the status quo, and that's when you see whether or not there really is psychological safety. Is do you get air cover? Do leaders say, hold up? This person not only is contributing, but they're making things better by telling us that we're doing things the wrong way. This is where you see whether there truly is psychological safety. It's a major validator if you've done the first steps properly.
It's a big one, because what you're saying is kind of like, do you have a space where your team or your leaders are saying, like, we figured out a better way than the status quo, or we refuse to live within the status quo, and the kind of maybe the mediocrity of that. There's a constant push, there's a challenge, but done in a really good and healthy way. That is, and for me, like, it's one of my biases when it comes to leaders, is that I love that leadership style. I love people that understand that, there's a lot of things that you need to do that are really core elements of leadership that you want to be aligned with kind of the vision and the values of the organization and the team. And these things make a lot of sense. But when those things kind of come off, when a strategy is not a good strategy, when something doesn't look like it's going to be the thing, they'll be the first ones to speak up and say, hey, wait a minute. Like, let's talk a little bit about this. Not that I'm saying I won't do it, or that I'm not going to align with whatever the strategy is, but I'm going to push back pretty heavy on this, or I'm going to look at this in a different way, or I've got this history of results and capability. I have a high performing team. We've been able to apply our skills to get these things accomplished. So what I'm going to ask for is the space and the ability to do this a little bit differently. Because I think this is what's going to help us to shape what this looks like into the future. And that's a really big ask, because, again, when you work for organizations and with teams, like, that strategy or that thing came from somebody. It came from a team. It came from another leader. It came from a boss or a boss's boss. And so you're kind of pushing back on whatever that might be to say, I don't agree with this, or I think there's a different or a better way to do this. And if you're doing that, feeling that, like, it's not going to have a negative impact on your career or those relationships, then that truly is psychological safety. That truly is a space where you feel good about voicing the opinion that might be different than everybody else, but you don't feel that it's going to get you into any trouble, because you're along for the ride, and because the space has been created for you to be able to do that.
Yeah, and people will start on this with little things. They will test it with little things before going into big things. And if you're never seeing any big things come from them, then it typically means that they tried it and didn't like the result, and they're just kind of keeping their mouth shut.
Yep, I completely agree. And with that, it brings us to this episode's 1-minute hack. But first, a few words from our sponsors.
All right, this episode's 1-minute hack is about following this process, because where a lot of teams and leaders do things wrong is they go directly from number 1 to number 4 without the need for that middle section. You invite somebody into the room, you hire somebody, you bring them in, and you say, hey, you're included. We want you to be here. You do everything right. And you go right to them into asking them to challenge the status quo and tell them you're going to give them air cover. One of two things will happen. Either you don't really mean it and they won't get the air cover for it because they are the new person in the room, or their ideas won't be rooted in anything real because they're too new. They don't have the learner part of it. They don't have the ability to, or the time spent contributing in a way that says, I know how to be here and I know how to do this work, to then be able to challenge things. They start challenging things right off the bat, and all of their ideas won't be good, because they're not rooted in any type of history, any type of work with the people in the room, or the way things have always been done. They don't know the speed limit, so to speak, and so they're going to break the speed limit every time, and then they'll get shut down for it, and then it's really difficult to go back to stage 2. So following this process and not just expecting somebody who is in the room for the first time to go right to being able to challenge the way things are being done is a great way to make sure that you are setting this person up for success, and you're not using new people as a test for the psychological safety of the team, because you'll never pass that test.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great call, and I think it is really important that you have an intentional plan around how are you validating, how are you building the spaces for the ability for there to be psychological safety, and when you are not seeing maybe the behavior, or you're not feeling that it's there yet with the team, that you're slowing down into those moments to find out different ways to bring that to life, and to practice different things, and to try different ways of engaging the team in these spaces to build the skill that they can then apply to the work that you have to do every single day.
Right. And it's so important to acknowledge that if you're a leader of 10 people, your 10 people will be in different stages of this at all times. This isn't something that is once all your team has been with you for a year or a year and a half, whatever it is, that they all should be at that top level. As you're doing new things, and as things are changing, as the organization's strategy changes, they will go back and forth in this list. They might feel very comfortable challenging something that they have a resume of 20 years of history on, but just because they've been on your team for 2 years doesn't mean they feel comfortable challenging something that is new to them. They might go right back to stage 1 and 2 because the strategy changed, or the process changed. So know that your people will move throughout this, and don't expect them to be at one level when they're at a different level. Know where they are, and kind of meet them where they are, and you'll have a better time getting them up, further along in this process as the strategy changes.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll talk to you all next time.